This week in Arsenal, the Gunners recuperate and regroup in Dubai. Mikel Arteta lets Salt Bay dangle his meat into his mouth, and the transfer window is uneventful. Let's get into it. Welcome in to This Week in Arsenal, episode 42. As always, I'm Sham, aka Killian Shambappe, and you can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. And as ever, I am joined by the one, the only Sash at LT Arsenal, aka hashtag Bring Back Aaron Ramsey, which is his display name today. Sash, how you doing, my friend? How's your weekend been?
Yeah, it was a weekend of travel. I flew back to Germany over the weekend, so a bit jet lagged. Got back into work this week, so it's been a bit of a slow start to the week. Still trying to get back into my sleep cycle, but this podcast always seems to wake me up and get me in the mood. So yeah, can't wait for it. And we have a special guest who you will introduce very soon.
Yes, very excited about the special guest. Um, yeah, it's it hasn't really been exciting times these last couple weeks. Maybe that's a good thing, but today, since we have that bit of a lull, we wanted to kind of just talk transfers. And when Sash and I were discussing who to bring on, you know, we couldn't get Fabrizio Romano on, we couldn't get David Ornstein on, so we went for the next best thing. And this man has become synonymous with Arsenal transfer news. He is the go-to guy for it. He is the one that you all love to meme and talk to, and he's from what I've seen, one of the most genuinely nice guys in Arsenal Twitter these days. So it's our pleasure to welcome the one, the only, the illustrious Eduardo Hagn to the pod. Eduardo, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing brilliant. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Always nice to see Sash. We've come a long way, and it's been a huge pleasure to meet you, Sham. We're here to talk about transfers, my favorite time of the year, and well, sadly, it hasn't been that active in that regard this January. But let's see if there's any surprises left in this last 2 weeks of window.
Yeah. Before we get on to talk about the transfers, I do think it is important to address the matter of global importance, which is the fact that Mikel Arteta went and had a fancy steak dinner at Nusr Et's restaurant over in Dubai. So, I just want to get you guys' opinion on this. How big of a scandal is it that Arteta went and had dinner at this guy's place? Sash, I'll start with you.
It's hilarious. The reactions to this was absolutely hilarious. Like the moment Arsenal lose a few matches and one of our players is just chilling. You saw even a couple of weeks ago when that picture of Saka, which was actually from last year's trip in Dubai, went viral. People were like, how can he smile? How can he be happy? Like, oh my God, like it's as if people think that when we lose 3 games in a row, the players and the manager should just be sulking. And it was hilarious to me to see the reaction. It was not surprising because this is Arsenal Twitter we're talking about. There are these elements on Arsenal Twitter who love to jump at every given opportunity. So it was quite funny, but also the meme content. Like Mikel Arteta has now become like one of the most meme managers around, and unintentionally as well. Like he's just naturally a funny guy without even meaning to be. And yeah, that clip of Salt Bay and him would went viral, and it's on all WhatsApp groups. It's everywhere. Everyone's sending me that picture, so it's quite funny. It's been a few difficult weeks actually to be an Arsenal fan, so to have a laugh about something like this, it's a bit lighthearted. So I just saw the funny side of it. How about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I thought it was funny the reaction to it. I mean, honestly, I really couldn't give a damn like what Arteta gets up to in his personal time, as long as it's not illegal or dishonorable or in any way or anything like that. I just think it's one of those things where he's famous now. People know who he is. Nasser Et, as we know, is like a big football guy. Like literally followed Messi onto the pitch during the World Cup. So, I'm sure he found out that Arteta was in town, sorry, and invited him over to his place, comped his meal. right? And why would you say no to that, even if the steak is overrated, from what I hear? But yeah, I think it was a nice little encapsulation of where Arsenal fans are emotionally right now. But yeah, Eduardo, what do you think?
I take it lighthearted. I think it was a nice moment. It's a memeable moment. It happens to me too sometimes, and I think it's normal. But people on Twitter, they don't forgive or forget either. So I'm pretty sure when there's something happening, imagine we draw or lose the next game, those pictures are gonna resurface and they're gonna put some crazy captions, and it's gonna be a whole moment of laughter. I mean, I see it that way. I don't see anything wrong with that because the man's eating and he's not doing anything else. Like, there's nothing, as you said, dishonorable about his actions. So I'm quite alright with it. No, and I like the fact that people are taking as a joke content instead of something worse.
Yeah. No, I've got that video queued up, just ready for the first opportunity to use it. So, but let's move into the transfer stuff, and I want to start with I think we've all kind of mentioned it at this point, how it's been really slow, right? I can't even think of anything notable that's happened in the Premier League. I think Region got loaned to Brentford, and Spurs, loaned in Timo Werner and signed Dragusin. Other than that, it's been very quiet. So, Eduardo, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts first of all on why it's been so quiet, and what factors go into that.
Well, I mean, it's definitely financial fair play. Everybody's scared. Now Everton and Nottingham Forest were sanctioned. Tottenham had the leverage that they sold their academy product for £100 million. So you have a lot of room to do things there. So they had that advantage. We at Arsenal, we don't. We signed a lot of players, and for some reason we just can't sell. Our club record sale is 35 million, which is either Oxlade Chamberlain or Iwobi, depending on variables. So, given the age, the year 2024, I think that's very bad in our part. There's players that we can fetch a lot of money for that we don't tend to do it. Imagine Ainsley Maitland-Niles at this time when we got offered 20 million, 25 million pounds from Wolves, and we didn't sell because we didn't think it was a good move at the time, and then he went for free. Now the same case happens with our Hale End products, Nketiah, Smith Rowe, players that are just part of the squad and are not pushing that first team starting 11 to the next level, and that should be cashed upon and improved in other positions. So I think the longer we wait, the lower the stocks are going to be for them, and we're going to get less money, and we're going to have less leverage to work with. So in that regard, I think Arsenal, it's a very specific case because, for example, Chelsea, they spend crazy amounts of money, but they get you 35 million for the janitor. So it's insane the level that they have to sell players. Same as City, they got 50 million for Cole Palmer. So he's a great player, but he wasn't worth that at the time. And they got it, and then they can respend, and that's our case. We have to get better. We have to be better, and of course, Edu has to be better. Something that Sash is always very hectic about. So, yeah, that's my
Yeah,
take.
no. Yeah, you tell you so that was something I wanted to talk about later on the pod, but we'll just move that up to here because I think this is a really good point to talk about, which is the problem that we've had selling and I think loaning players as well, right? And I really think you hit the nail on the head there, where you look at Chelsea and they are just selling guys left and right for pretty sizable sums, and these are guys that it's pretty public knowledge they don't need, right? Like you said, Cole Palmer and Lewis Hall. I mean, even Kai Havertz and Mason Mount, right? Those are two players who Chelsea made very clear that they wanted to get rid of, and they still made almost 150 million off the two of them, right? Um, and so it is really disappointing because before we jumped on here, I ran a quick poll asking people, who do you think is going to go for money when they get sold? Armando Broja, or Eddie Nketiah, right? And I think it's like 56% in favor of Nketiah right now, but that's kind of crazy to me that it's so close, even, right? Broza doesn't really have that much of a track record, really, in the Premier League. Nketiah has been here for years, has scored, a plethora of goals, playing for a team that's in the Champions League, competing for a title, 2 seasons in a row now. And I would be shocked if we sold him for 30 million pounds, which is really disappointing. So, Sash, I'll ask you this question first. What do you think we need to do to improve our ability to sell and also our ability to loan? Because I think we do have a problem with loaning out some of these academy players the way that Chelsea and City do, right? And making them more attractive, prospects for other clubs to sign.
Yeah, I think it's a historic issue, to be honest. I think when Ben Napper was the loan manager, it was better, but still not perfect. And I think that issue has continued into today. I think it's to do with how we as fans also view some of the youth players. Maybe they're just not as good as we make them out to be. Like when any Haaland player comes, it could be a Kido Taylor Hart, it could be Miguel Aziz, it could be any of these players. They obviously have a lot of talent. If they didn't have talent, they wouldn't be playing for like the Arsenal under 21s, for example. But as fans, we put them on a pedestal where we think these guys are destined to make it. We've seen it historically as well, like right from Fran Merida to Zalalem. Every era has like 3 or 4 youth players who fans think are going to go right to the very top, but for some reason they don't make it. And I think at teams like Chelsea and Man City, there is lesser spotlight on the youth from fans in general. And some of these youth players actually are very good, and they go under the radar because obviously the focus is on the first team. You see the way Chelsea are stacking their first team, the youth gets ignored, and it's similar for City as well. So these players are able to go out on loan, develop under the radar, and then get loaned to Premier League clubs and then make that step up. And I think at Arsenal as well, there's this obsession that a youth player has to play in the first team. Like we try to force youth players into the first team. Like I'm also sort of guilty of it. Like take Charlie Patino, for example. I think he's a really good talent. And for me, I want to see him playing in that LCM spot. But let's be real here. We're competing with Man City. Can we really expect Charlie Patino to play that role? And is he as good as some of us think that he is? So I think it comes down to perception. Maybe some of these youth players that we even loan out are not as good as we think they are. We try to make excuses saying that, uh, the right back, Brook, not in Cuffy, he didn't have a good loan last year, and we blame it all on the loan. But I think maybe at the end of the day, the player is also maybe not good enough because a really top player, a top talent would probably thrive irrespective of which team he is in. Now, I know this is not universal. You've had in the past where Serge Gnabry played at West Brom and everyone wrote him off. And then he goes to Bundesliga and a better environment. He shows incredible ability. But I still think that's sort of an anomaly. And I think if you're a good player, you would thrive no matter where you are. And even take Ruel Walters, for example. We keep saying, that he should make the first team and he should be playing. But I've spoken to people who watch the youth team, and Ruel Walters also has made quite a few mistakes for the youth team. So people are looking at Man City, they're seeing the players City give the debut to, like they did to Rico Lewis last season. But I think the bottom line is maybe our players are just not like good enough, like a lot of them, from a loan point of view. But I agree that in terms of sales, we have to do so much better. And I'll be fair on Edu as well. It's not an Edu problem. It's been that historically, where we've failed to sell players and get the value that they deserve to get. And I think a huge reason for this is sometimes we have players who we are desperate to sell, It's not like we're selling a player who might play for us. These are players that, it's very clear to outside clubs that they are not going to be at Arsenal. So they just try to like run it down the window and eventually hope that we agree like for a loan or like a termination. But having said that, I think we can do better. Like I'm not a negotiator, but and I don't know really what the solution is for us to sell better. If I knew that, I would probably be working at a football club. Um, but I think the bottom line is yes, we have to get better at selling. If you look at the other teams, the way they sell players that are similar level to ours, they get money for them. But I do think this will improve as well because look, we're playing Champions League after 7 seasons, right? And we're going to have some assets like Smith Rowe. I would not put Smith Rowe as a player that Arsenal want to shift out, but it's a player that Arsenal will listen to offers for. And I think players in that sort of a situation who might stay or might leave if a big offer arrives, I think those players will actually fetch money. So I think in the next few years, I see Arsenal improving how we sell players because we're going to be in the Champions League. We're going to have a lot more depth in the squad. So there's going to be players who would want to go out. But these would also be players that are not like the Ozils and Aubameyangs who are on 350K a week who the club wants to bin. So I think there will be like proper competition for these players. And I do see Arsenal improving in this regard. But yeah, I do agree with Eduardo Hagn as well. What he said, like we have to improve like the way we sell players right now because with FFP and stuff like that, you need to like also generate some revenue. So we might have to make a unpopular sale or two in the coming windows.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think one of the main solutions that we can implement is that we just don't we just need to start getting better at featuring some of these players. And obviously there's a tightrope to walk there with involving guys like Smith Rowe and Kedia and Nelson and not tanking the season. But yeah, I think we've generally been very bad at kind of broadcasting to the rest of the world maybe a slightly different opinion than how we really feel about certain players. Um, as for loaning, I resent the insinuation that some of these youth players aren't ready, Sash, because all of Twitter is telling me that they can save our season and that Arteta just isn't giving them a chance. So that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, Eduardo, what are your takes here? How can we improve in the sale and loans of some of these players that we have?
Well, I think the easy solutions to know when to let go. We've had the moments in the past where there's offers on the table and we reject them. Happened with Lacazette that summer when Roma, on the last day of the window, they offered 30 million and we said no. And then he went on to go for free. So sometimes you have to question your planning because as much as you love your club, maybe it's not being run well in certain regards, and that's totally fair. I think no club's perfect. But we as fans have to acknowledge our problems and try to face them. Because if we try to hide it with idealistic ideas of thinking that we have the best players in the world, Man United fans are always like that, but we tend to do it as well. So we tend to sometimes overrate what we have and undermine what others have. So, but I think that's the normality of any football fan to try to protect what your club stands for and everything. But I think it's a matter of sentiment. I think we Arsenal fans are probably the most emotional of all the big six clubs. We tend to get too attached to players when sometimes it's time to let go. It's the normal cycle of life. Academies are meant to gain profit, not to produce 30 stars, starting players for the team. It is what it is sometimes, and if we change that perception that every Helden product is gonna be the next Ozil, the next Sanchez, we're probably gonna be better off with selling, and that's gonna be all better. You see, I never see Chelsea fans getting attached to their youth. I see Valentino Livramento having a fantastic season at Newcastle, and some Chelsea fans regret it now. But when he was sold, they were like, "Okay, that's it," and they get their money and they reinvest in whatever they need. So I think that has to be our approach going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. In that we don't trust the loan, or sorry, we don't trust the academy players as much as we should, right? I feel like whenever we hear about a good talent, people just grab at them and just like hold on for dear life, as if we're never going to have another player go out the door, or another we're never going to have another player show up who can be at that level. And I think you're absolutely right. Where Chelsea fans, especially, seem to have this trust that their academy is just going to continue pumping out talent, and I think we have to get there as well. Yeah, I mean, I just kind of bring up that other point about how we're going to we're going to have to make unpopular decisions in terms of sales sooner rather than later. I do predict that Aaron Ramsdale is going to become our record sale this summer. Just because I frankly don't see
How
him
much
going
do you
for.
think? How much do you think he goes for?
I want to say 50 or 60. I think 50 is probably, just because, like, you know what, he's going to be 25, 26 in the summer, still fairly young for a goalkeeper. English, which adds a premium to it. He's shown that he is exceptional in his distribution ability. Obviously, there's some work to be done in his shot stopping, but it's not terrible, right? And yeah, I think he's just generally shown that he can be a starting level keeper at a very competitive team, right? I wouldn't be, he got linked to Chelsea. I think Bayern also, there are reports linking him. So there might be some big teams sniffing around Ramsdale. And yeah, I just don't think a guy like that with that kind of interest in him should go for less than, 50 to 60 million, especially given, the circumstances around that player. So let's move forward into probably, I guess, the big news of today and this week, which is Ivan Toney, right? And I think is it AFC Amden or AFC Camden? It always that his username always throws me off.
AF Camden, right?
Is it AF
Yeah, yeah.
Camden?
He played with the name. It's AFC Camden, but since they both start with a C and end with a C, he used only one C.
Interesting. Okay. So AFC Camden tweeted out, I believe it was last week or beginning of this week at this point. And he basically said that the plan is for us to sign Ivan Toney this summer. That's our number one option. So obviously, sometimes people who are in the know like that get it wrong. Sometimes the information is not correct, but, he has been right about a lot of things in the past. So, I just want to get both of your thoughts on, how you feel about Ivan Toney being the preferred center forward signing for Arsenal. Eduardo, I'll start with you first. What are your thoughts on Toney?
Well, I like the player. I won't lie, but I think Arsenal are a point in the project where they have to go for the best available player for that position. And for me, I love Ivan Toney. I think he's great, but I am not sure he's the guy going forward. I mean, I am not sure that in 5 years I see Ivan Toney leading the team forward because he's going to be 32. He has only one season where he scored over 20 goals in the Premier League, and most of and a bit over half of them were penalties. So I wouldn't complain at all if he comes, but at the same time, it would leave me with a bad sensation that we could have gotten better. You see, I would get pissed, for example, if in the summer we get Ivan Toney for £75 million and Chelsea get Victor Osimhen for 105. It's
Yeah.
like, how do Chelsea, which are not even competing for Champions League football this year, are getting a better talent than Arsenal? So that really doesn't stick in my mind. And you see, I think there are so many options at center forward, like at least in this summer upcoming. You have Benjamin Sesko, you have Dusan Vlahovic, you have Osimhen, you have Tony there. You can even question Solanke if he continues going like that. So I don't know if I would put all my eggs on the Tony basket, especially for the fees that are being touted. I mean, if you tell me it's 40, 50 million pounds, I can make a case of it and I can accept it. But if you tell me it's 80 to 100 million pounds for Ivan Toney, I would have to disagree with that, and I think would have to go for a premium player. That's my take.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Sash, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what Edu had to say here. But there's just one slight caveat here. So I think Arsenal, if they're going for Ivan Toney, it signals to me that we might also be looking at a wide player. It could be Pedro Neto, who's been widely speculated. So I could see Arsenal doing something like Tony for 60 million and a winger like Neto for another 50, 60 million. I could see us doing something like that because I don't think the solution for Arsenal's attack is simply having one new centre forward. That would obviously help, but it's not the be all and end all. I think we also need some depth out wide because if Saka and Martinelli get injured, let's be real, none of the substitutes can do what they do on a football pitch. So we definitely need some sort of a reinforcement out wide as well. And if you look at the way the squad has been built over the last few years, Mikel Arteta has built this team from its foundations, from the back and then the midfield. If you look at the offensive signings that Arteta has made in recent years, you have Gabriel Jesus for 45 million. And then you have Kai Havertz, who I actually count more as a midfielder than a front three player, at least based on the vision Mikel Arteta had. So I'm not including him here. I'm looking at Gabriel Jesus, I'm looking at Trossard, and then I'm looking at Willian, who was signed on the free. That's very little offensive signings for a team that wants to compete like with Man City, and it's no coincidence that that's where our problems are, that bit of efficiency and a bit of variety in the way we attack. So I think this summer is going to be the summer of flair, where we, add that firepower to, I think, a foundation which is very stable. Yes, a lot of talk is there about us signing a midfielder, but it's just one midfielder that we need, who can play in that left central midfield spot instead of Havertz, offer that playmaking option to bring the best out of Martinelli or whoever the left winger is. So I think this summer is going to be the summer of creativity and flair. So I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal go for Tony for 60 million and then also add in a winger for another 60 million. But if you gave me a choice personally, I would go for Vlahovic. That's my choice. I think Dusan Vlahovic is a player who will get you 20 Premier League goals a season in our system. That was the reason why Arteta was willing to pay 75 million for him 2 years ago in January. And I wouldn't be surprised if we go back in for him. If you see historically, we have gone back for players that we were once linked with. And if Vlahovic might be available and Juventus, they have some financial problems and whatnot, so they need to also sell some players. I would not be surprised if Arsenal end up going back in for Vlahovic. I think it's one to watch out for. I think Edu did mention some other options, like Solanke as well, who might be a bit unpopular, but I think he's a really good player. I did put out a tweet saying that watch out for Solanke this season. He's not the same player. He's improved so much. His all-round game was always pretty decent, but I think this season he's taken it one step further. And you need to also look at strikers within the league who can come in and do the job for us. So it'll be interesting to see who we go for. My selection would be Vlahovic. I'm not going to get carried away with Osimhen just yet. I think there's more to that Osimhen deal because one is his transfer price, which is 105 million pounds, the release clause. But apart from that, I think there's also like some agents that play there, and Chelsea obviously have a firm interest in him. So it's not a deal I want to put all my like put all my hopes on, because you've seen the way Chelsea have signed players that we wanted in the past, and Arsenal, they're not going to pay extra money to agents over and beyond what they originally planned for. We won't do that, and I think that's a good thing that's helped us in the transfer market, that we are a club that would only pay what a player is worth, and we wouldn't get into bidding wars and things like this. But on the flip side, I also think it leaves you vulnerable to some of these freak clubs like Chelsea and PSG coming and trying to sign your player. So I think let's be realistic. Let's look at a 60 to 70 million striker. Vlahovic is one of them. Tony is one of them. And I wonder if Ollie Watkins might also be one of them, but maybe he does not fit the age profile that we're looking for. But I think he's another player that is one to watch. So there are options out there, and I'm confident Arsenal will get one of them over the line. The reason why I prefer Vlahovic over Tony is because Vlahovic scores you goals. As Edu mentioned, Tony's scored a lot of penalties, and it's a hard one because he's playing for Brentford, who's a mid-table side. So maybe at a bigger club like Arsenal, with the ball flying in the box, he gets more goals. But still, that's a bit of a projection. But with Vlahovic, he's been wherever he is, this guy bags goals. I think he scored 20 Serie A goals before he even moved to Juventus a season. So he is a prolific goal scorer, and he's the player that I would want to sign.
Yeah, I knew that you were going to talk about Vlahovic.
Also, sorry, just one last thing. If you saw the goal Højlund scored for United in the weekend, that's what I want from a centre forward at Arsenal. I know Højlund might not be the greatest example to use because he's not had a great goal scoring record so far, but his talent is undeniable. He's an incredible ball striker who can score out of nothing. That's what we need at this
Yeah.
club. Someone who can pick the ball in the box, boom, goal, and 1-0. That's what we want.
Yeah. I think Tony is tricky because there are very clear pros and cons to it, right? Obviously the pros are that, instead of spending most of your transfer budget on Osimhen, you're hopefully spending 50-60 million on a guy who has only 1 year left on his contract, and then you can go get, Pedro Neto or Nico Williams or Antonio Nusa or someone like that. And then you can also, go grab someone in midfield. And then Premier League proven and all that. But I mean I agree. With both of you guys in that I want someone with top end talent. I want a game changer leading the line because we don't have many, if any, of those. Right? I mean, I think Saka and Martinelli have the ability to be, but Saka hasn't. Has been on a bit of a cold run lately, and I think Martinelli, we're just not doing him any favors tactically. And Tony doesn't really strike me as a game changer kind of player. I think he's a great presence in the box. I think he can run the channels. I think he's good at link up. Everyone keeps on talking about his goal record last year, but as both of you guys have pointed out, it's not, it's not the sample size really that you'd preferably look for. And on top of that, I think there are a few Premier League strikers who I'd prefer over him, to be honest, right? There's Dominique Solanke. There is Ollie Watkins. I think my preferred option at center forward overall would be Alexander Isak, right? Over at Newcastle, who are, reported to be having financial issues, are going to have to sell a star, right? Guimaraes is probably the most likely to depart. But, I really wanted Isak when we got linked with him. And, I just think he has all of the talents that you're looking for, right? He's a really fast player, can play out wide, can run the channels, but also he can link up very well. And he has, the height, the imposing 6'4" physique. And while he's not necessarily, the strongest looking player, he knows how to use his body. And I think he has that ability to really pull out moments that can define a game, right? Just look at what he did against City. So I mean that would be my preferred option. But my worry about Tony is that he's going to be 28 when we sign him, and the rest of this team is between 22 and 26. And I just worry that we're going to get a couple years in, and he's going to be 30, 31, and he's just going to plummet off the age cliff, and then we're going to have to go back into the transfer market and Isak and Watkins and Solanke and Xerxes and Sesko and Jimenez and Gyökeres. Right? There's so many really impressive center forwards out there, but they're all probably going to be off the market or, at least prohibitively expensive the next time we have to go back into the transfer market to sign one. So, again, there's pros and cons with signing Tony. Also, I'm just, this interview that he did today, where he was talking about, I want to go play for, a big team. It doesn't leave the best taste in my mouth. You kind of worry that if you sign a guy like that and then, Real Madrid or Bayern Munich come knocking, his head's going to get turned really quickly. So, we'll see. That might just be some trauma from the mid 2000s talking, but yeah, not my preferred option. Wouldn't be furious if we signed him, but yeah, let's see what happens. Eduardo, you put up a really interesting question on Twitter. Actually, hold on. Before I ask you about that, because Sash and I gave our preferred center forward choices. Who would you want to get if it were up to you?
It's a good question. I would love to see the rest of the season, but my top three right now would be, I think Osimhen would stay at 1. Number 2 would be Isaac. Number 3 would be Vlahovic. I think I think sometimes you have to look outside the Premier League to find talent. I think Arteta, for some reason, only likes talent inside the league, and sometimes there's something big out there, and you have to open yourself to those chances and let players prove themselves in this league too. So I think this three players that I mentioned, Isaac came from Real Sociedad for 70 million. It was a huge bet from Newcastle, and it turned out good. And now he's worth more than what they paid for him. Same will happen to Osimhen. He's got a huge price tag on him, but he's proven to be very effective in Napoli. He made them champions when they hadn't won a title in over 20 years. And Vlahovic as well. His record in Serie A is immaculate. So I think you have to give chances to some people from the foreign. Look, City went for Haaland when he was scoring crazy, but in the Bundesliga, and now he came to the Premier League and he translated that even better than he was in Bundesliga. So I think sometimes you have to look outside and not only inside. And even though you even have to pay premium when you buy inside the Premier League. So I think that'll be my top three: Osimhen, Isaac, and Vlahovic.
I think that's a really good top three. Yeah, I just I understand why Arteta wants to get a Premier League center forward, right? Because that, I guess, removes a layer of risk from the transfer. But I mean, I'm with you, in terms of there's a lot of great talent out there, and we didn't make the bet on Isaac because we were worried about how that translated. Look how that happened, or look how that turned out. And yeah, I mean, there's so much talent out there, and I really don't want us to overlook it just because we don't want to spend that much money, or we're a little bit scared of what would happen. And for the price tag, I think you can make it work if you're able to sell your players. That's the bottom line. But I wanted to ask you about this question that you posted online. And so, as we all know, Everton also are getting caught up in some FFP issues. Looks like they're about to be charged again, which is honestly tough luck for them. But you asked Twitter if they would rather sign Onana or Branthwaite, sorry, from Everton. And I think both are really interesting players, but I wanted to get your take personally as to which one you'd rather get.
Look, if I were an Arsenal fan and this would be for any other club, I would probably say Jared Brantway. I think he's the better talent and his projection is probably going to be better than Onana in his position. But due to the needs that Arsenal have right now, I would have to choose Onana because I think Gabriel, he's an undisputed starter. He's one of the best in the league, and spending 50, 60 million pounds on Brantwaite would make a silly allocation of funds mistake. So I think in that case, it would be Onana.
Sash, what's your thoughts?
I think I view this slightly differently. So I'm trying to think even for the summer ahead. So I think we're going to lose Jorginho and El Neni in the summer. I think Thomas Partey will stay for another season.
Don't tell me that.
And I think I think Arsenal will sign Zubimendi. This is my prediction. And if it comes true, please feel free to clip it and post it on Twitter so it goes viral. But if it doesn't happen, just forget that this podcast even happened. But this is my prediction that we will sign Zubimendi. I think the club has been looking at him for quite a few windows now. He's a player that Arteta really likes. Wanted to sign him last season in January as well, but the player opted to stay and he didn't want to leave midway through the season. But in the summer, things could be different. We know he has a release clause, and we know Edu Gaspar loves to trigger a release clause. So I think there's too many things that tell me that he will be an Arsenal player just from the region he comes from, which is the same where Arteta grew up as well. And it's a club, Real Sociedad is a club that Arteta, he follows quite a bit. We did sign Odegaard based on his loan spell there. We were also interested in Isaac based on his loan spell there. And we've been heavily linked with this guy. He fits exactly what we want. A guy who can play as a 6, but also has really good creative qualities to play as an 8 as well, and try to do what Xhaka did last season, help us progress the ball, help us in build-up. He's already a leader, so I think he ticks a lot of boxes. And for a midfielder in today's market, getting a player like that for 58 million is actually going to be a really good deal. So I see Arsenal doing that. which is why I would probably refrain from signing Onana as of today. And I would look to sign the centre back Brathwaite, because I think we could do with another player over there, because even Kivior, he's getting linked with moves away, so I don't know what the future is there. And if we believe that Brathwaite is going to be a top talent at left centre back, we might as well sign him. I would rather we sign the better player, take a hit in the short term, and then build from that. Because I think this season we've discussed this, and I'm sure we'll discuss it as the pod goes on as well. I see us competing more for the Champions League than the Premier League. I'm not saying the league is done, but the way we are playing, I don't know if we're going to maintain a level of consistency that's required over the next 19 games or so. So I think Champions League it is. We have to play well on the day. I'm confident that this team can do something special in the Champions League, but I think the Premier League is a bit of a write-off. So I would refrain from doing any short-term move to try and win something right now, but rather forego it to the summer, because we're only in the Champions League, in my opinion, in terms of seriously competing.
Yeah, I understand that thinking, and also Sash, I want to ask, have you been looking at the notes that I wrote down for this pod, because you keep on going to the next thing that we're going to talk about, and it's like you're in my head.
Yeah, we're in sync.
This is a
the
good sign.
chemistry. Yeah.
This is a good sign. 40 episodes, and we've got that telekinesis going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that line of thinking, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and I tend to agree with the logic, but I guess in a vacuum, I would say that I prefer Onana, because I think he really fits in a way what we're trying to do, right? I really love the imposing physique. I'm a sucker for like big tall players. I prefer to bully people on the pitch, but on top of that, I think he's an excellent two-way player, right? Really good tackler, really useful defensively, good at set pieces, both offensively and defensively, but also I think he's a pretty solid carrier of the ball, and I think he's a really underrated passer. Um, and in a way, he almost reminds me of Pogba, right? I think Pogba also had very similar two-way qualities. Obviously, I think Pogba might be the Pogba's definitely like the better offensive player, or at least he was in his prime, than Onana is. But I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there, and I think he would just bring more quality to the side that we need than Branthwaite would. But I also rate Branthwaite really highly, right? I watched him play a few times, and it feels like a quicker, more technical Mertesacker out there, if that makes sense. Just a guy who, super long legs, really useful for the tackle, really great passer, seems to read the game really well, but you're not desperately worried about him if he's in a foot race. So I just thought that would be a fun little question, but
There's one more fun little question which one of
For
the
sure.
viewers has actually asked here, which I find interesting. Will you take Benzema for 6 months?
For who? Oh, it's a hard idea to turn down given the lack of goals. Benzema for me, top three, top two of the greatest strikers of this generation. Uh, I would have to see how he's been doing at Saudi, because if his level has dropped dramatically, then it doesn't really help us that much. So I couldn't give you a definite answer, but if his level's close to what it was in Madrid, I'll definitely say yes.
And you, Sham?
It depends on how much money he wants, right? Because
Why
the
though? It's
guy,
going to be 6 months. Like, even if we pay him 500K, like it's just for 6 months. So
yeah, I don't think I would do it. I mean, I I agree in that Benzema is a generational striker, right? And he is going to go down in history as one of the best ever. But I mean, I don't think playing in Saudi for 6 months really helps your level. I remember I watched a few games back at the beginning of that season, and it was just crazy, just how the lack of quality that I saw in a lot of those games. So, I don't think that really improves you. And also, obviously he's getting older. He's not as spry as he once was, not as sharp as he once was. I mean, the guy's probably going to demand $500,000 a week or something crazy like that. I just don't think it's worth it, especially because he's going to be behind Jesus in the pecking order, probably. And I don't know how he's going to react to that. And historically, Benzema hasn't exactly been the greatest locker room presence. I'm sure everyone remembers, on my mother's life, he's playing against us. There's a couple players in this Arsenal team that he would definitely say that about.
You know,
So, yeah.
I don't care about how toxic he is, but if he wins us the Champions League, that's enough for me. Like it's all
Sash,
forgotten.
a question.
Yeah,
If you had to choose
yeah.
Benzema for 6 months or Cristiano Ronaldo for 6 months,
I would
Same money?
choose Benzema.
same money.
I'd probably
Karim
go Benzema
Benzema
too.
for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
Benzema.
What about you?
I'd go Ronaldo. I think he'd give us an edge on in the Champions League. I think that competition. There's something that goes beyond what you can explain, and there's just players that have that greatness about them, and I think they're always going to show up when you need them. And I think Ronaldo, he doesn't even have to start, but just put him in when you need him, and he's going to show up because his ego is so big that he's gonna want to win it. So, and if we can benefit from that for 6 months, I'll take it.
And I mean, he's probably better than Eddie and Ketia anyway. So,
but yeah,
I mean, Havertz is better than Nketiah for us right now.
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Can't believe it. What a fall off from grace.
Yeah.
And Ketia, he's a fantastic finisher, but like nobody plays well with him. I mean, the team looks disjointed when he starts. Like it doesn't flow.
Well, that's why I don't understand these reports that Crystal Palace apparently are knocking on our door asking about Nketiah, and we're refusing to sell him.
I don't understand that. I mean,
because maybe I'm being mean right now, but if you sold Nketiah today, we would not miss him, right? Because you'd have Jesus, you'd have Trossard, you'd have Havertz. In an emergency, you could play Martinelli at center forward, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think all four of those guys play the role better than he does.
And I think Nketiah's value right now is probably at the highest it will ever be. So it don't make sense to sell now.
Yep. I mean, that's the thing. I think, and you mentioned this earlier in the pod, where I think we just get so worried about being wrong about selling our academy products, and it's just, maybe there's another reason for it, but I think that's what it is, and that's just not the right mindset to have, because every academy player we've ever sold, I don't miss them, right? Even if they've gone on to do well. Willock has had a great career with Newcastle so far. Iwobi was pretty good with Everton. Now he's with Fulham. I think he's doing well. Also, full Nigeria international. Obviously not an academy product, but Oxlade-Chamberlain, we don't miss him. Balogun, he has 4 goals this season. Every time we sell someone from the academy, it doesn't really bite us in the ass. There's one academy player who I'd be against selling right now, and that's Saka. And then other than that, they really can all go, and that's fine as long as we get enough money.
Yeah,
I think Serge Gnabry is the only one that maybe we could have kept or done better with him.
Yeah. I think that's a good shout. But
but look, it happens every time. You see Daniel Malin, he hasn't been great at Dortmund, but he's a great caliber player, and we let him go for free. So nobody remembers Malin, but he did his career and he got to a big club. So they'll slip away.
There's another player I think in Serie A that we let go for free.
Benasser.
Yeah.
We let Esse go. Esse at Crystal Palace, we let him go at 13. So and not even to mention Harry Kane when he was young, because Liam Brady thought he was fat.
Some of those players, I'm not furious about, because at the end of the day, maybe that's something they had to go through to become the player they are today. But then in other situations, I just look at that and I just think, man, like we probably knew what we had there and we let it go. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's tough, but I wanted to shift gears, right? Since we're you know doing this big transfer special, and we're talking about what moves we think we're going to make. Um, Sash gave his answer to this already, but Edu, I just want to get your take on outside of the center forwards, right? Out of all the players that we've been linked to, like Heto and Zubimendi and Onana, Jones, etc., right? Which out of those players do you think is most likely to sign for us either this month or in the summer?
Given the context of his contract, given the context of the position he plays, and what I see Arteta liking in that vision, I think it would be Jorrel Hato from Ajax. He's 17. He's a youngster. A lot of people on Twitter go out about and say, "No, how can you have this kid playing? Where we can aspire anything with this guy?" But this guy is the youngest captain ever at Ajax. This guy, you've seen him play in the Europa League. He looks like a seasoned veteran, and he's gonna be an investment that won't cost that much. I mean, I think with the remaining contract he has, it won't go over 30 million pounds. And this guy, with a contract of 5 years and 2 to 3 years from now, he's gonna be worth close to 100 million if the progression continues. So that's something you have to take your shot now and solidify what you want, because this guy in the Zinchenko role, he could be special. And Arteta's liking for this inverted left back role. This guy is a great defender, great with the ball at his feet. He's a leader. There's nothing not to like about him. He's from the Ajax Academy, which is very reminiscent to Arsenal and their style of play. So I think in terms of money, investment, wages, potential wages, and what the player can contribute now and going forward, I think he would be the safest bet for Arsenal right now.
Yeah, and if even if it was short lived, the success of Urian Timber that we saw this summer, I think is a good indicator of maybe the fit that would be. Okay, yeah,
and over that, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No
I don't see Urian Timber playing at left back going forward for Arsenal. I think he's going to compete with Ben White for the right back role. And Ben White, I know he's nursing an injury, but his level they have dropped, and it's okay but you need competition. This of the sentiment that you think a player needs to start because of the name is something that we have to get our heads out of it. You see, at City, you see Ruben Diaz didn't start for City last season for like 3 to 5 games straight because they had Akanji and Ake and different options that are playing better at the time. So Uriel Timber is going to have to compete with Tomiyasu, with White, and the center backs are going to have to compete with whoever comes as well. So I think Uriel Timber's future will reside in being an inverted right back. And Hato will have to compete with Zinchenko because profile-wise, they're both left-footed. I mean, in the end, if you have a right-footed left back, you will have some problems with the fluidity. The only when you don't see a problem is with Tomiyasu, who you don't know if he's right-footed or left-footed because he's equally that good. But going forward, you're going to need that profile.
Yeah. I think that's a really good shout because we've got linked, very heavily to Hato, and it seems like exactly the kind of signing that we'd want to do. Yeah, so I think that's a good shout. Sash, what do you think?
So between now and the summer, I don't see Arsenal doing anything in January, honestly. Like, I'll be surprised if we sign a player. I could see maybe like some short-term loan. I don't know who, but some short-term loan at the most. I don't see Arsenal actually going out there and spending big money to sign anyone this transfer window. I just don't see it happening. I think we're going to save all our money for the summer. And I think in the summer we will sign Ivan Toney. I think we will sign Zubimendi. I think we will sign this Ajax kid. And I wouldn't be surprised on top of this if we also signed a wide player, possibly Pedro Neto. So I see Arsenal signing 4 to 5 in the summer, but at least 3 to 4 of them would be like 50 million plus signings. That's how I see it unfolding. I think last January Arsenal did sign the Jorginho and Trossard, we did strengthen, but I don't see Arsenal doing any stop gaps this time. I think we're just going to go and look to sign players that are meant to compete with the first teamers in the summer directly, rather than compromising right now. Yeah.
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 I think for me the most likely signing is probably Zubimendi, just because, for all the reasons that you guys have laid out previously, he's from the same area of Spain as Arteta is. He kind of plays like in a similar style to Jorginho, right? I think he's a little bit more physical in the tackle, a bit more athletic than Jorginho is. But yeah, he just kind of fits that profile of like a midfield controller, right? And I think he would be a really good complement to what we have in Odegaard and Rice. We'll see whether or not we hold on to Party. But I think Zubimendi is a guy who would make sure that you don't have to rely on Thomas Party's fitness, right? Which I think has been a really key issue for us in 2 or 3 consecutive seasons now. So I just think he's a style of player that Arteta really likes, and also I think Arteta likes players who he sees a bit of himself in, right? And that might just be me pulling something out of my ass, but I think he really identified with Odegaard when he signed him, right? He saw like a young but quiet leader in Odegaard, and I think that's exactly the kind of captain that Arteta was when he was at Arsenal, right? He wasn't like a shouty captain, right? He wasn't like grabbing people by the scruff of the neck and telling them to get it together. He was that lead by example type of player, and I think that's exactly who Martin Odegaard is. And I think Zubimendi is also someone he can identify with, right? Again, from similar part of Spain than he is, and Arteta, especially in his time with Arsenal, was more of like a midfield controller player, more so than an actual creative midfielder, right? That he was when he was with Everton. So, yeah, I think Zubimendi is probably the most predictable signing in my opinion. But I think Neto is also a really good shout as well. So, this is the last question I have for this pod. But after that, we can just waffle, or if we have to get out of here, then we do that too. But um, I just want to get both of your thoughts on what you think happens between now and the end of January, right? Because we've got 14 days left. Obviously, it's been very inactive at this time. But do you think there are any sales or any kind of opportunistic acquisitions that we make between now and the end of the month? Sash, I'll start with you.
In terms of acquisitions, I just cannot see anything happening unless something happens like what with Brentford today. Ivan Toney, I see an interview of his where he's like, I want to play for a top club. If it becomes so toxic between him and Brentford, maybe Brentford say, okay, we will loan you to a club who will then buy you in the summer with an obligation. If anything, I can see something like that happening. It has to be like a loan. I don't see Arsenal spending money for this window. I see it being a loan with an obligation, if anything. And you don't see clubs selling players like that either in the January window. Like, can you imagine Arsenal loaning Smith Rowe in January with an obligation to purchase in the summer? Like, it just doesn't make sense, because in the summer you're going to have more competition, and you also don't want to lose a player in the middle of the season. So I think logically looking at it, nothing else is going to happen for us between now and the end. But in terms of outgoings, I can see some activity, like maybe the El Nenis and Cedrics of this world might finally find a buyer. I think it'll still be a miracle if Arsenal manage to get funds for Cedric. Like, I think it just goes to show you how bad a deal this was, Cedric. Like, the fact that we cannot, for 4 years, we've been trying to sell this guy, get even 1 million for him. We are not able to do this. And every summer we hear the same thing. Oh, some club is interested and are willing to pay 2 million or 3 million for him. It never happens, right? It never happens. And we've seen similar stuff for El Neni as well in the past before he got into Arteta's good books. And yeah, this was again my frustration with Edu. Like, we signed certain players who we had to like terminate. Like, I think it's a good indication when no club is willing to like spend money on a player, how bad that player is. So it is what it is. I think this is the last of that sort of player who we're just having on the books and trying to get rid of. And I think, yeah, the summer will be the start of a new cycle. So I think, yes, don't expect much in the next couple of weeks. That's what I would say. Like, I think fans are expecting some huge deals to happen. I think they're living in their own world. I'm seeing a lot of stuff on Twitter as well. People saying, oh, we should sign this player, that player. Like, it's January transfer window. Funds are tight. FFP is being implemented. Let's be real here. We spent a lot of money in the summer. Maybe the signings we bought, couple of them didn't work the way we wanted as of yet, but still we did spend a lot. That's the bottom line. So let's make do with what we have, find internal solutions, and go until the end of the season.
Mr. Hagen, how about you?
I think it'll be quiet, barring a movement from either West Ham or Crystal Palace for either Reece Nelson or Eddie Nketiah, which becomes a formal bid, and a one that Arsenal would consider. If that's the case and they decide to sell, I can see them fast forwarding one of the deals. But if that doesn't happen, I think it's impossible due to the funds. And well, the same with departures. I think it's either Cedric Suarez or El Neni. They're gonna go. They have no role in the team basically. And if the backup player gets injured, they won't even play. So I think Arsenal can afford to let them go. So I think, yeah, it depends on if either West Ham or Palace make that move for either of the players that I just mentioned. If that happens, I think Arsenal will have a decision to make, and then you can get a ball rolling, and maybe you get a deadline day type of deal that gets the fans excited, type of thing.
Yeah.
I know Edu is still hoping deep down that something happens. He's waking up every day at 4 a.m.
I need that. I need that
too,
count.
man.
That dopamine rush, no?
You see, West Ham, they want a winger and they haven't gone close to anyone at the moment, and they're interested in Nelson, according to the reliable people that we all follow on Twitter. So you never know if they go out with a 15-20 million offer, and Arsenal decide to let go. So you never know. And if Palace lack so many goals because they've been lacking very much, and they put a 35 million pound offer for Nketiah, and they decide to sell, then you have the room to move your leverage because they're FFP compliant, because they're homegrown, and it's all profit.
Yeah. I was also just thinking of one more thing. You mentioned Eddie to Palace. Weren't we interested in Mark Guehi? Like, I think that was a really concrete link from us.
Yeah.
I wonder whether something can happen.
It could be, and even Brentford. If they talk to Brentford and they're interested in Eddie, you can even make that switch, Tony, Eddie, and then the finances will work for Arsenal.
Yeah. I like how it's always our garbage player plus cash for a top player.
We can't sell anyone good right now.
Yeah, I mean Smith Rowe. I don't see anybody offering something close to what Arsenal value him at. So I don't see that possible. So Villa could want him, but are they going to spend 50 million pounds? No, I don't think so. I think it's either Nketiah or Nelson. Those are the two players that couldn't go.
I think we've pretty much tanked Smith Rowe's value at this point. I mean, we'll see what happens with him in the second half of the season, but I think it's one of those things where, either he's just going to stay on the bench for us for a few years and run out of his contract, or someone's going to bid like 20 million and we'll just accept it and move on. I think that'll be about it.
The other one that I have a real preoccupation with is Ramsdale. You see, I thought Ramsdale and Newcastle were a match made in heaven, but now with the restrictions and the problems they're having financially, I doubt they're going to have the money to forge out 50 million pounds for him. And I don't see much other clubs waiting another 6 months of him stagnating on the bench to pay such fee. So,
I mean, obviously, like we're not in the room with all these folks, and like we don't know, the more nuanced dynamics and all that, but I think you can get creative. I think you can approach Newcastle and say, you want Ramsdale, we want Isak, or we want Guimaraes. So you take Ramsdale, we take Isak, and then, you pay us another 20 million, or we pay you another 20 million over a period of time. And, let's not get points deducted.
Yeah,
but,
could be.
again, I'm not in the room. I don't know a lot of the details, that need to be sorted out for this kind of thing. But I guess my main frustration with the window is, yes, we have FFP restrictions, and we've spent a lot of money, and you don't want to do too much turnover midway through the season. But we have, I think, at least three, probably four players sitting there on our bench who we are not going to use that much between now and the end of the season, who could fetch us enough money to, go get someone who can change the course of our campaign.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. I'm personally not expecting much. I think maybe we loan someone in, like a left back or something. I don't think we're going to loan an attacker. I know someone asked about loaning in a striker. I think we're going to loan in like a left back or maybe a defender of some sort. And Cedric hopefully is gone. I think if Egypt do what I'm pretty sure they're going to do and crash out, the first knockout round, then maybe El Neni will be back in time for us to sort an exit for him as well. And yeah, I think that's about it. I think the Premier League really cracking down on FFP has, shut down the January window this time around. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yep.
Yep. Sash, you got any other questions for our illustrious guest here?
Yeah, I have a question for Edu, and this is something which we sort of discussed last week on the pod, but I want to get Hagen's thoughts on this. Like, do you think Arsenal can do better than Edu Gaspar as a technical director? Because look, I know I've been critical of him a lot, right, in recently, but I will also acknowledge that he's done a good job in some other respects, like the rebuild that we've done. Obviously, he's had a say on the players that we are signing. But what I don't understand is that people blame Arteta for the signing of like Havertz, but there's not a word about Edu. Okay. And when I say that Edu doesn't sell players properly, they say no, it's the negotiators, it's Richard Garlick and people like this. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think Edu's role actually is at this club? Like, and do you think we can do better than Edu? Because look, he's from South America, and you're also actually from South America, so you would know some of the top talents that are coming from that in football. And the signings that we've made, guys like Marquinhos, Pablo Mari, these are the types of buys we've made under Edu. And Gabriel Martinelli, by the way, a lot of people wrongly attributed to Edu, but it was actually Francis Kagijao who bought him much before Edu even became the technical director at Arsenal. So my question to you is this: can we improve that spot? Because I'm seeing Michael Edwards available, and I'm thinking to myself, like Mikel's talent ID is already so good. If you get someone like a Michael Edwards or someone who's really proven at the top level in next to him, I think the way we do business can even improve more. What do you think?
I think in this case, you can always get better. There's always going to be someone better out there, and if you can get him, you should. Edu Gaspar, I think he's done good things. He hasn't made many mistakes, in my opinion, but that doesn't mean he can't do more. And there's so many up and coming talent in Brazil, in Argentina. You see the Diablito Echeverri that just signed for Manchester City. He was one of the biggest talents here in a lot of years, and he went there for $80 million, which is like 10, 12, 13 million pounds. So you have to question when will Arsenal really compete for a top talent from South America or from somebody from somewhere else. So yeah, that's his responsibility. I think the role of the technical director would be to oversee how the club operates and how the scouting department works. And if the scouting department can't find a player like that, then it's like any store CEO. In the end, the responsibility falls under the one that's in charge. So in this case, Edu Gaspar, for me, I wouldn't blame him for everything because I think at a football club, many decisions are taken as a group. But he does have to be much better. And if he's replaced by someone who's proven, whose track record's immaculate, like Michael Edwards, I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't change him for a scouting for a scouting manager, because we saw how Mislintat came and he bought horrible players. When he signed Mkhitaryan, he had 3-5 good games and that's it. So Mavropanos, you could argue he was a good scouting, but there's so many other cases where you have to say, wow, no. And
Yeah,
for example,
Torreira. Yeah,
Torreira, and look,
Socrates.
Cagigao here in Chile, he was the technical director of all the national teams in the last 4 years after he left Arsenal, and he did a horrible job. Maybe his thing was scouting, and he scouted Gabriel Martinelli and Cesc Fabregas and Alexis Sanchez and wonderful players. But sometimes the wearing the suit and having the thing on your hand doesn't mean you're gonna be just as good as you are in another thing. So I would only change Edu Gaspar for someone that's proven and their track record is immaculate.
I think that's a very mature answer. And I think it's similar to what Sham said as well, his opinion on it. He acknowledged that Edu has done a good job, but if it ever gets to a point where like Arsenal need to upgrade on that position, he would do it. So I think that's a very mature response. And also the point you made about the technical director, like being someone who's not a scout, like Edu obviously has other responsibilities as well. And scouting is one of the things. So I think the example you used of Francis Cagijao with the Chile team is a good one. And that sometimes I think things that fans, including myself, might miss because we're like, oh, the scout got us all these players. Why couldn't we have kept him? I think that's a really good point, and definitely gives me like a different perspective. So yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah. I'll put my thoughts on Edu like this. In the NFL right now, right? There's a discussion being had about whether the Cowboys and the Eagles should fire their head coaches in the wake of a first round exit in the playoffs to go hire Bill Belichick, right? The 6-time Super Bowl winning Patriots head coach who now has left and is interviewing for head coaching jobs elsewhere. And a lot of people are saying something to the effect of the Cowboys and Eagles have good head coaches. I would fire either one of them to go hire Bill Belichick, right? And I think that same principle is how I feel about Edu, right? I like Edu. I think he's done a pretty good job. I think he's made some mistakes. I think there are some issues I have with him in terms of loaning, depending on how much influence he has on that, and our inability to take advantage of his South American connections, and just a general question on how much influence he has or how much of a check he has on Arteta when it comes to transfers, right? Hashtag Havertz. But like Sash said, Michael Edwards is out there. And Michael Edwards, I think, is a guy who can change the direction of your club. And I would fire Edu right now if that meant I could go sign Michael Edwards, because, if he ends up with Newcastle, if he ends up with United, that's a problem for us. And so I would rather go get that guy and make sure that, we're the ones who benefit from it and not anyone else. And, do you think Edu would make Newcastle or Manchester United do you think he would turn them suddenly or over the course of a few years even into like championship favorites? Probably not, right? And I think that's something Edwards might be able to do. So, but outside of that, I'm not firing him to promote a scout or anything like that, like you said, Eduardo. So, yeah, that's where I am with Edu.
I like how Edu and Eduardo, they have the same like first 3 letters.
Yeah,
So
most of the time they call me Edu. So
But yeah, I think that'll do it. That's a good place to put a bow on this. Sash, unless you had anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm just looking forward to, in the deadline day, to all the memes, like the Hagen meme where like the angry Hagen meme. Have you seen that one? That one and Gaspar as well. So
I
I'm
still
looking
remember
forward.
someone made a Mission Impossible one where I was hanging from a plane, and it was like,
No way.
yeah. Oh my god! And the Hagenator too. I had like that Terminator face.
Oh my god.
Yeah. But Edu Gaspar's name is Eduardo, just as me.
Really?
They call it, yeah, because the Edus in Brazil, Eduardos are called Edu.
Oh wow. Okay, I didn't know that. So what a
Yeah.
coincidence that the technical
Yeah.
director of Arsenal has the same name as the biggest
Do,
transfer account.
do you guys remember when CRAFC posted that I was gonna be the next chief scout?
Oh
Yes, yes,
yeah.
That
yes.
was so funny.
I fell for it for a minute. I will admit that. I was like, man, good for him.
There was a whole
I
article in the Athletic about it. That
yeah.
players were asking themselves who was I and things like that. I was
Oh man.
like, yeah.
I once put out a tweet saying that Todd Bowley was on the verge of hijacking the Jorginho transfer before realizing he was a Chelsea player. Within brackets, Eduardo Hagn. And
Yeah, and
everyone.
people fought for it.
I like to
Yeah,
use Eduardo and Chidi as like a decoy to end, or even Rohan to end whatever fake news I post.
yeah,
The Rohan ones really, people bite those pretty hard.
yeah.
I think the last one like literally went viral and people
Oh,
were
the
like
Rob
following.
Holding one coming
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, like 100 people followed Rohan after that one. That was funny.
Oh my
But
god.
but yeah, Edu, the good Edu. Not to say that, the other
The Edu
cast
I
members,
like.
but yeah, the Edu that we like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I
Edu,
appreciate it.
it's been a pleasure to have you on, man. Honestly, this it's been a really great conversation. It's been really fun talking transfers with you, and I genuinely really appreciate your insight. So, thanks for coming on, man.
Nah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I think it was long due that me and Sash did a program together, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Sham, once again.
Yeah, for
I
sure. Yeah.
hope we do this once again. But yeah, I had a great time. I hope you guys had too, and the audience as well, of course. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
that's that.
Yeah. No, I mean we'll have you back on as soon as we can, man. Honestly, it was a lot of
Awesome.
fun. And so
Appreciate you
for
guys.
those of you watching, those of you listening, you can follow Eduardo at Eduardo Hagen on Twitter. Again, he is the go-to guy for all the Arsenal transfer news. He is on top of it always. And yeah, it's been great. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. Follow Sash at Bring Back Aaron Ramsey. Uh, Just kidding. Bring him. Follow him at LT Arsenal, and then you can follow the pod at This Week Arsenal. And yeah, we really hope that you've enjoyed it. Really appreciate you being here with us and taking the time to listen. Until then, be a gooner, don't be a goon, and we will see you soon after
Yeah.
we beat Crystal Palace. Yeah, you thought I was gonna forget, didn't you, Sam?
I thought you were gonna forget. So the tradition of this podcast is that Sham always says, "See you after we beat so and so team," and when he says that, we actually win, and when he doesn't say
Okay.
it, we lose. So
Okay. So we're fine. 5-1.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sash
we'll
has
be
been on
fine.
me to say it. So
we are winning
uh,
this weekend.
yeah. So we'll see you after we beat Crystal Palace. But until then, take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.